All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Matei. You may know me, you may not. I use Arch. That's the only important thing about me. And today, we're going to be talking about how to organize your life. And what does that really entail? Well, it entails a lot of things, but we'll start with the simple things. We'll go from the basics, and we'll keep going higher and higher throughout the tiers, getting ourselves on the higher levels of difficulty in terms of being productive. So the first things first, the slides here are at the URL you see now on the screen. I would recommend you don't look ahead. I would recommend you keep watching, but they're good for later. I did not mute Discord. I just got distracted by Discord, so y'all can drink. And so will I. Cheers. Now that Discord is actually muted, we can begin with the actual first slide, which is that I have a question for you all, a question that I would like you to answer in the chat. And the question is very simple, actually. It's a good icebreaker, because quite frankly, I don't know how to start. So, how's your New Year's resolution going? Now, I want serious answers here because I know everybody's just going to go like, oh, I don't have it anymore. But I want to see some serious answers going on here. Did you actually stop? Did you keep going? Is it still going well, or is it going bad? My iPad just got locked. You don't remember what your resolution was? Well, that's bad. You never made one. Yeah. Join this. All right. Interesting resolutions. Now, I got a better question for you. How was your New Year's resolution going? Because some of you maybe didn't even have one. I'll do even one better. Did you even have a New Year's resolution going? Well, I see, according to the chat, that you didn't. Tiffany, don't feel attacked. It's fine. God, oh my God, I am doing really badly. I didn't read the chat. All right. So the point is, New Year's resolutions are an interesting thing, right? But now, for all my data science peeps out there in the chat, we have graphs here, right? Because we're good with research, and I'm going to show you the amount of data that I've gathered over the past few minutes and graph the amount of engagement that that you might have over the year with regards to your New Year's resolution, right? The horizontal axis is the amount of time that has passed in the year, and the vertical axis is the amount of effort you put into it. And this is the graph. Now, I am very similar when it comes to New Year's resolutions. In fact, New Year's resolutions have always fascinated me, because they seem like this thing that everybody did, It's a part of productivity and a part of a time of reflection, Because when you start the year, you think about whatever you've done over the last year, and you think about, I don't know, maybe you didn't run enough, maybe you ate too much bad food, maybe something else happened. I don't know. There are different goals for different people, and in general, it's just how it goes, It doesn't make sense how everybody has New Year's resolutions, and yet nobody follows them, right? So I came to a riveting conclusion long ago, this is 4 years ago, which is that New Year's resolutions are bad. They're bad for a very simple reason. It's because they're the universal example of a commitment that you have experience with and you generally fail to follow, and more importantly, it's because it's an outburst of willpower in a very short period of time, which is the beginning of the year. And that's because human behavior changes hard, right? It's hard to change who you are. It's because it's who you are, right? You can't get a person to help you with it. You sort of always go on. It's an uphill battle. Improvement is an interesting concept in general, and I've always been confused as to how to fix it, right? I've always thought it would be easy, right? And New Year's resolutions seem to be the way to go, right? But that's not the case anymore, right? So long ago, I sought to find out how to change that. Now, the way I did it, well, it's a long story, but this workshop follows my journey. And it got me through a lot of books and a lot of research and journals and magazines and YouTube videos. And it's been a ride, but I think I've got something going. What you're going to see today is mostly what I did to organize my life, and I think I did pretty well with it. I'm not definitely not at the top 100% of my life here, but I'm getting there. So let's start off with with a very old thing, right? We'll start off with a trip down evolution lane. This is Steve. Steve is a caveman, right? Back in the long, long ago, we didn't live in a society. Isn't that... Oh, wait, what happened? Did my slide just crash? Yeah, I think my slides crashed. Oof. Let me get them back up again. I'm going to pause the recording. I apologize for that little pause. I accidentally crashed my slides, which happened. Sorry about that. Anyway, moving on. This is Steve. Steve's a caveman. And Steve, back in the long ago, didn't live in a society. He was... Anyway, apologies for that again. I accidentally crashed my slides again. So, our caveman here didn't live in a society. And you see, he had different priorities, you know? He had issues that were very simple. Like, for instance, what do I eat now, right? He didn't think about what midterm he had next week. He didn't think about what exams he may have had. He didn't think about, I don't know, his rent, his mortgage, or any of the things that we would consider today as being priorities. He generally just, you know, looked at the thing that was in front of him. And for instance, if there is a saber-toothed tiger right behind him, I can guarantee you that he wasn't going to focus on what he was going to eat the next day. And that makes sense, right? I mean, those were different times. And survival of the fittest makes it very obvious that at the end of the day, whoever, you know, is fit, doesn't die is the person that gets to evolve, the person that gets to advance. So every one of us, every single human being, takes the traits that people have had in the long, long ago. And the trait that was very important in the long, long ago is that people prioritized the short term instead of the long term. You prioritized getting away from the saber-toothed tiger. You prioritized, for instance, I don't know, to lighting your fire. You prioritized hunting and gathering. Certainly not things that we prioritize today. And today, there are a lot more things that we do that are long-term rather than short-term, right? Our day-to-day routine is pretty much set, except somehow we still have the same issues, right? It's hard for us to picture the bigger image. It's easier for us to look at the immediate moment. That's why procrastination is so common, right? It's far easier to panic when you notice there's a deadline in a couple of hours rather than noticing there's a deadline a week from now. And sadly also, we have another enemy, kind of. Now, this enemy is very obvious, which is that humans are lazy. Now, I want to dispel a concept here, which is that I don't want you to think that lazy is a bad word. I want you to think of lazy as a different definition. You think of lazy as like sitting on the couch doing nothing. But I would like for you to picture the word lazy here as min-maxing, right? And Trask has it right. Laziness is the inspiration of innovation, and I got distracted by chat, so that's cool. We generally have minimized our effort to maximize the happiness, the output that we got out of life, right? Whatever it is that we wanted. And this is why humans were made to be lazy. Because when you think about most of the other animals, they've evolved to fit a very specific task, and they do it very well, and they work hard to succeed at that task. But humans, well, we never really had that. We're mostly interested in becoming the best there is for anything, right? And that's why we're lazy. But that's not a problem, because humans have done many things while being lazy, right? We got tired of walking, so we got horses and carriages. I couldn't find a stock photo, so here you go. Something I drew. We got tired of building stuff, so we made factories. We got tired of living in caves, so we made houses. We got tired of many things. We even got tired of things that we've made to help us, right? Here's a gaming PC that I would very much love to have. And people who work like in development, right? Computer science is the epitome of laziness, right? You take everything that you can, well, laziness in the correct term, right? The one that we talked about, minimizing effort maximizing output. And that is really the important thing here, right? Like, we got tired even of computer science in general. We got tired of running simple commands, so we made scripting languages. Humans have this inherent ability to create some form of like easy way to become lazy. Now, how do we do that? Well, the part of our body that does that is our brain. And before we get there, I would like to have a bit of a clicker question, which is a question that has to do with your brain, right? And the clicker question is not going to be using a question, using an actual iClicker, sorry, but I'm going to give you a question that I want you to answer, and it's the following. When was the last time you put an effort in flicking a light switch? Now let me see how I turn on the poll, and I'm going to shut off the recording in the meantime. So I don't think you guys can see the poll, but it was pretty even. But everybody memed and picked option D, but a lot of people picked option C, which is the expected answer here, which is what? But yeah, I mean, when you think about it, flicking a light switch is something that you do, and it's part of your life, right? And when you think about the actual act of flicking a light switch, it's kind of difficult to sort of picture that, right? I mean, it's not really easy to flick a light switch, or as easy as we make it to be, right? Because how do you know how to flick a light switch? Like, a cat can't do it, a baby can't do it, but we see it as a very simple activity. And that's because we've done it so many times that our brain has found a way to make it very fast, right? We know that you just have to do this or this, and you flip the light switch. Now, your brain is lazy, so your brain generally tries to subconsciously come up with shortcuts, right? It tries to take every single thing that you do in your life and make it as automated as possible. Even simple things like flicking a light switch. Neurons that fire together wire together, right? Like, the neurons that make your brain sort of flick the light switch are the ones that always do it, the ones that will always do it forever. And repetition is what got that going, right? Like, for instance, the multiplication table, the times table. I remember when I was in 3rd grade, it took me an entire day to actually memorize the thing. It was brutal. Like, I didn't get it. Like, how do you do that? But now I'm in, like, almost 2nd year of college, and it's automatic. Like, I just think about it, right? 9 times 7 is 63, and I hope it's actually 63 because I am, on recording. Regardless, it's a thing that you've repeated so many times that it's become natural to you, right? Much like other things, like, say, drawing. Drawing is very difficult. That's my Zapdos, by the way. But drawing is very difficult, right? The light, the shadows, everything that you do, right? It's not as simple, but with time, it gets easier to draw things. And that's what I want you to focus on today, which is that our brain has a very specific process in how to make things automatic. And there's 3 stages to it. The first one is discovery. Your brain looks at the options that you have, right, for the environment. It has a problem, right? Let's say you have to, flick a light switch. And it looks at it, right? It tries to poke at it, prod at it. What can I do to the light switch? Does it say anything on it? Can I make an educated guess as to what this thing does? Or maybe with any problem you might have in math, right? CSE 21, for instance. I don't know. How do I solve this problem? Do I use a theory I've done before? Do I just randomly do it, right? Ishan, the only joke you missed was that people put effort in flicking their light switch, and I just got distracted.
Am I supposed to be able to unmute myself?
No, you are not. All right, we're done. Sorry about that. Moving on. Your brain, like I said, tries to poke at options, right? Tries to look at and see it as to what it can do. And then eventually, say, you find what you were supposed to do, right? You find the solution to the problem. You flick the light switch. And your brain realizes, like, wait a second, I did it, right? I did the thing I was trying to solve. So wait a second, what did I actually do? Well, your brain starts to figure out how you got the reward of that process. How did you finish it? How did you get the solution? It starts thinking of the thing it actually did to get there. And it sort of incentivizes you to do that again using hormones. It realizes that you've done that thing before, and then you just repeat it and you will get the same thing, right? If you keep doing this every single time, you will get the same reward every single time. And this is where reinforcement comes in, right? Now that you've done this thing and you already know what it provides you, whatever this learning process might entail, your brain focuses on making it more streamlined. It focuses on the shortcuts that I was talking about earlier, and it focuses on making them as related as possible to the original thing. Your brain starts linking the reward of the actual problem with the initial thing itself, right? It links the light turning on from your room with flicking the light switch, and so efficiently that you don't even think about it. It just knows, like, I want to turn on the light. Boom, done, right? And then repeat, and repeat this for as long as your brain works, right? That's just how it is. Our brain learns like this. And there are different kinds of learning, right? Active learning, passive learning, but there's also subconscious learning, the thing that I was talking about earlier. And habits are subconscious learning, which is what I've been getting at for the past 15 minutes. Habits are the way that our brain turns things that we do every day and makes them subconscious, automatic. It takes the simplest of things, the smallest of things, like flicking a light switch, and makes it a part of you, ingrained in this entire process. Now here's the kicker of today. The thing that actually got me interested long ago and made me realize something. What if you were subconsciously organized? What if instead of focusing and putting willpower into being a productive individual, it came naturally to you, right? It could be done after all. I mean, there are people out there who are actually productive, right? So this is the important part here. What if we made productivity subconscious? What if we made it habitual to become the person we want to be? And to do that, we need to know how habits work. But more importantly, we need to know what makes habits solid. Now, this is a nice little flowchart that I made, which is recursive, or rather looped. And I want to clarify here, a solid habit doesn't mean it's good or bad, right? A solid habit is a habit that is a part of you that is very, very clarified. Now, whether it's good or bad is up to you. I don't know what you would like for you to do, right? But every single habit in your life, whether it is good or bad, follows this very simple 4-step process. Now I'm going to show you that by actually describing a habit and linking it to the flowchart I have to my left, which is where I keep looking. That's where my slideshow is. But yeah. So we'll start with the cue, right? Let's say that your habit is brushing your teeth. Right? It's a habit everybody has, at least hopefully. And we'll start off by linking it to this chart, right? What is the cue of you brushing your teeth? Well, it might be as simple as a time of day, right? You wake up in the morning, you brush your teeth. Maybe it is that you have a bad breath. Maybe it is that you just finished eating lunch. Point is, a cue is an event that makes your brain realize that something needs to happen. There's a problem. There's something I need to fix. And the cue here, let's say for you brushing your teeth, is that you have a bad breath, right? Now the craving is the part of your brain that realizes that a long time ago, right, in the grand scheme of things, your breath smelled good, right? You knew that you had clean teeth, a nice breath, and basically that's what your brain wants you to have, the craving, right? It wants you to get that good breath again. And that's what motivates you, right? The dopamine hit. And also, to clarify, for anybody here who knows what dopamine is, just to quickly dispel a myth here, dopamine reinforces craving, not the reward. Your dopamine is what gets you motivated to do something, and that's where the craving is. Now, a response is a pretty obvious thing, right? You respond to a craving by doing something. You want to get that good breath, and you know that brushing your teeth achieves that. So brushing your teeth as the action itself is the response. And lastly, the reward is that you feel good. Sorry, I didn't want to skip a slide. The reward is that, your breath smells nice. And that's when your brain realizes that it associates your good breath with brushing your teeth and with the cue. This entire loop reinforces itself due to the reward. It realizes that every time I get a bad breath, I have to brush my teeth, and I'll get a nice smelling breath again. And the act of brushing your teeth is pretty pretty basic. It's a part of your day, maybe even annoying. But over time, you brushing your teeth maintains dental hygiene. It maintains good, nice white teeth, right? We'll get into that a bit later. But for now, I want us to come up with a solid habit. And I'll ask you to put this in the chat, and I'll read them later. Which said, I want you to type in chat a habit of your choosing, and I want you to be serious. I don't want memes here. Of the following format you see on the screen, right? A cue, a craving, a response, and a reward. And exactly how does the response associate itself with the cue and the reward? So I'm going to pause the recording. You guys take as much time as you want and show me examples of habits, right? I'm going to put the actual format in the shared notes because you might want to copy paste it real quick. Resume. All right, we're back. We've been spending a bit of time in the chat coming up with various routines and various formats. And I want us to start off with two habits that I saw in the chat. First one being Kyle's. Now, Kyle came up with the following habit. Cue is waking up. The craving is that they're hungry. The response is that they make breakfast. And the reward is that the food is good, right? And in this case, eating food, like making breakfast, gets associated with waking up, right? The reason, this is a habit, right? Technically, it's part of your morning routine. But the reason why this is not as good as it should be is because there's a bit of vagueness as to where and how you go from waking up to being hungry, right? And more importantly, there's vagueness as into how does the reward of good food associate with waking up, which is what we'll talk about later, about how you should look at habits in a different way. And actually, the next slide. Ishan also came up with a good one. The cue is that there's an opportunity to make a pun. The craving is that he wants to make people's eyes roll. The response is that he makes an amazing pun. And the reward is that he gets some good laughs. Now, let's look at this, right? Ishan is known to make many puns, right? In fact, you could say he makes too many puns and he should be punished. But let's not get there. The idea is that he's made puns so many times that now he kind of wants it, right? Every time he sees an opportunity, his brain immediately jumps at making that pun because he associates the reward of seeing people roll their eyes and laugh with making puns. And it's a part of it, like, he wants that to happen, right? You would want to be happy and laugh, so you keep doing it. It gets reinforced in your brain, and you keep making puns, and it becomes automatic. However, I want to really focus, like I said before, on Kyle's habit, particularly the fact that it was kind of extensive, right? You go from waking up to making breakfast, but there's a ton of things in between them. And he didn't really address those. But we'll get there in just a moment. First, we need to think about habits in a different way. Let's think of them in a more abstract way, not in this cue, craving, response, reward kind of thing. Let's think of them from a further away perspective. Like, say, let's think of them as functions, right? Solid habits are, in essence, functions. And if you take them, right, solid habits are very hard to start and very hard to break, right? Any habit that you have that is either good or bad that you keep doing is very hard to break. It's the black box principle, like Kendall mentions in the chat, and I just got distracted again. The idea being that a habit, internally, you don't necessarily care what happens, right? Your brain kind of abstracts that away from you, but what you do care about are the cue and the reward, the input and the output of the function, right? The idea here is that all habits are like this, but importantly, they're like this if they're clearly defined. So I'm going to give you an example of something that's really cool, because you see the cue and the reward share the same data type, which is an event in your life. And all habits share the same input and output format, the same data type. So you can chain functions together to gain more parts of your life, right? Your alarm rings in the morning. Your habit is to turn off the alarm. Once you turn off the alarm, your phone is in your hand. So once you take your phone, you might notice that there's notifications there. So in that case, you check your phone for notifications. And then once you do that, you feel satisfied that you've finished, and then you check the time, and then your day keeps going on, right? In this case, you can see how habits can chain. One habit's reward, or rather the output of that habit, can become the input of another habit. Habits chain together to form bigger routines, routines that are part of your life. Now let's say that this is a habit that I want to break. Personally, I check my phone in the morning when I get out of bed, and I don't like it, right? So what if, for instance, I wanted to change that? Well, like I said, I can't really change the solid habit of checking my phone that easily, right? It's too hard. But what I can easily change are the cue and the reward, right? That data type, that external data type, the variables I feed the function. Because I wouldn't check my phone if there aren't any notifications, right? So the idea here is to change the cue. Instead of waking up in the morning and checking your phone because you have notifications on it, what if you didn't have any notifications? Well, you would do the other thing that you associate turning off the alarm with, which in this case is getting out of bed, right? So you have that. And that's how you break a habit, right? It's a way of doing it, and we'll talk about more later. But the idea here is that I didn't change the habit itself. I changed the cues surrounding it. Because if you do that, it will be a lot easier for you, because your brain streamlined the habit, but not the external factors. The easiest way to actually achieve the no notifications cue is to just turn on Do Not Disturb on your phone, which is what I do now. And it's a habit that I've more or less successfully broken. That is, unless I forget to turn on Do Not Disturb mode at night, which can happen. But the idea here is that even the tiniest of changes, right? Turning on Do Not Disturb on your phone makes a world's difference. Tiffany, I keep notifications on for different reasons. I just got distracted. Darn. Moving on. This technique actually has a name. It's called habit stacking. After current habit, I will next habit. The idea here that you chain habits together on other solid habits you may have. Like, say, for instance, you have, the habit of drinking coffee in the morning. And say, after you drink your coffee, you would like to, eat an apple. Well, you need to make it absolutely clear in your brain, well, after I drink my coffee, I will eat an apple. And if you do this, and you repeat this sequence enough times, your brain will subconsciously reach for an apple every time that you drink coffee. And it's going to happen because that's how habits work, right? This works to replace old habits because you can use the cues of one habit to replace another, right? You can use, like I showed you before, the cue of turning off your notifications for your phone to avoid having that happen to you before. Tiffany, this whole thing is going to make sense later. I didn't steal the phrase. I used it. I got distracted. I'm getting way too distracted. Anyway, let's get to the second thing, right? Like I said, you can use this technique to add new habits as well. Now, you might notice that we're talking here about very, very small sets of activities, right? Getting out of bed is a very singular task. So is checking your phone. Maybe checking your phone is a bit more complicated, but it's kind of like using a function that has like helper functions, right? When you make breakfast, you don't just make breakfast. You get the bread out of the fridge, you put it on the table, you cut the bread, you do all the other things that are related to making your breakfast. So this is why chaining habits also reinforces a combination of habits. Your morning routine essentially becomes a set of habits, right? Your morning routine is you waking up, getting out of bed, eating coffee, drinking coffee, making breakfast, checking your phone, whatever it is that you're doing in the morning. And these sort of become kind of like a super function, right? These become helper functions that are part of a larger function. And let's say the morning routine input is that you wake up, and the output is that you're ready to start the day, maybe even energized. Who knows? Now, we have the technique going, right? We have some theory, so we're going to have to get to some practice here. We know what makes habits work. We know what makes them tick. We know how to chain them together. But now let's get to some actual useful things here. Let's get to actually getting you to use this knowledge to your advantage. So let's start with this. What do you do as a habit in a day, right? Now, the way I want you to do this is that I want you to, sorry, I made a mistake here. I want you to make a list of habits, right? You don't have to put it in the chat. you can keep it to yourself. But if you want to put it in the chat, you can do that. And I want you to make a list of habits that is as singular as possible. Not saying wake up, eat breakfast. Like, try to think of every single little thing, right? Try to think about waking up, getting out of bed, opening the blinds for your window maybe, brushing your teeth, checking your phone, going to bed. Sorry, not going back to bed, sorry. I don't know, going to your kitchen, making breakfast. Try to think of the very small things. And after you're done, I will show you my habits. I will show you what I do in the morning and give you an example of how you can approach changing your habits for the better. Now I'm going to pause the recording so I can give you time to select habits and put them in the chat if you want to. But otherwise, if you don't, you can keep them to yourself. But I would really like you to at least list them down on a piece of paper. All right, so the chat just did it. More notably, Bryce went way too far and made 21 habits in the list. But what I just asked you to do is called the habit scorecard, which is that you list out what you do in your as a habit in your day, and we'll talk about why this is useful in just a moment. But first, let me show you my set of habits, right? First, I wake up, right? Then I turn off my alarm clock. Then I go to the bathroom. Then I brush my teeth. Then I drink my coffee. Then I eat a healthy breakfast, which I make because, everybody likes making a healthy breakfast that totally doesn't have only peanut butter and jelly and a Diet Coke in the morning. I'm totally kidding. That's not what I have. Then I eat Nutella because that's totally healthy. Then I check YouTube because that's also totally the first thing I want to do in the day. Then I walk the dog in this house. Her name is Gigi. And then I do my homework, and so on. Now, you might notice I added a little bit of a thing at the end there. Those are what I like to call scores, right? Each habit in your life is either good, bad, or neutral. That is according to you, right? I don't know what it is that you necessarily want to do with your habits, but the idea is that certain things don't bring or take anything from your life at all. It's just a thing that you have to do, kind of. Some things bring positive aspects, and some habits bring negative aspects. And as you can see on the PowerPoint, I just listed what I consider to be things that I think are bad, and what are the things that I consider to be good. And this is where habits sort of become a game, right? You have a list, a score, right? The higher your score is, the better. And the higher your score is, the more organized you will be, or rather, the closer you will be to the version of yourself that you want to be. So what do? Well, you take all the habits that I just listed, and you look at every single one of them and sort of try to link them, right? When I wake up, the alarm rings, so then I turn off the alarm clock. Don't care, it's pretty neutral. I have to do that anyway. Then, once I turn off my alarm clock, I go to the bathroom. That's a positive habit because I don't want to fall into the habit of checking my phone in bed. At least that's me, right? I think I'm about to... No, I'm good. Anyway, then I brush my teeth. It's a neutral habit. I do it anyway. Then I go and drink my coffee. Now, I think drinking coffee for me is a positive habit because it gets me up in the morning very well. It's pretty cool. Then I eat a healthy breakfast. Again, it's just each one of these has a cue and a reward you really want to focus on. Now, let's take a bad example here. Say that Nutella that I've been talking about. Maybe I want to break that habit of eating Nutella right after a healthy breakfast because that's totally not a good thing to do. So what I do here is I look at the cue, right? I'm done with my breakfast. It was healthy. And then I realize maybe the cue is that I want something sweet, something sugary. In that case, I look at Nutella, right? It's easy. It's nice. It feels good to eat it. But I don't want that to happen, right? So I take that cue that I said of having the need of something sweet and replace it with another sweet product, like say, I don't know, apples. Apples can be sweet. But I don't know. Generally, anything that you might find healthier, like a granola bar. Granola bars can be sweet, I guess. But the idea is to replace the habits that you have with a certain cue and change the cue or anything regarding to them to make them or change them to a positive habit that you already have, already have. If you don't have a habit that you want to establish, you can create it, but you don't have to create it in that specific sequence. You should first solidify the cue, the response, and the reward. But the question here is, how do you make a habit solid? Well, as we know before, a habit has a cue, craving, response, and reward. So the important part is to get those things solid. right? And how do you do that? Well, you supercharge those aspects in your brain. You want to make the cue be as powerful as possible, the craving, the response, and the reward. And those are the 4 laws of habit change. The cue is obvious. That's what makes a habit solid. When you have your phone and you're checking your notifications, there's that red bulb on your phone that tells you have notifications, or there's the notifications on your lock screen. The cue is as obvious as it can be, right? The craving is attractive, right? If you check your phone right now and you see what those notifications are, maybe you get to see, I don't know, some new post on Facebook or something else, right? It's a thing that you really, really want to do. And it's attractive because of many benefits that the activity might bring to you as a person, or maybe the craving that the thing that it satisfies. Checking Facebook might satisfy your social validation needs. That's a thing. The response is easy, right? Checking your notifications on your phone isn't hard. You just tap a button, and now that if you have a new iPhone, you just have to look at your phone, and you automatically open it to the notification. The process was streamlined by Apple, right? It is as easy as possible to check your notifications. There's virtually no overlap at all. There's nothing stopping you from doing it, or nothing that is incredibly hard. Lastly, the reward is satisfying, right? You wouldn't check your notifications if you knew on the other side there isn't something cool, right? It's pretty obvious. Now, how do you make a habit? Well, I was going to say soft, but that's probably a poor word. How do you break a habit? Well, you stop it from being a solid habit. And how do you do that? Well, you take all of those laws that we've just talked about before, and you reverse them. You make them the inverse of what we just talked about. Because that way, your habit is just the opposite of a solid habit. It just becomes a habit you don't want to have. The first thing, the cue should be invisible, right? And how do you make the cue invisible? Well, I don't know. Maybe you want to reduce exposure to the cue. Like I said, turning off your notifications. If you want to make the craving unattractive, maybe try to reframe your mindset towards approaching that activity. Instead of looking at the positive part of checking Facebook, which is, I don't know, being socially up to date, maybe you look at the negative side, which is that it might waste a lot of time in your day or in your morning routine, which can happen, right? I mean, you might waste a lot of time. The response should be hard, right? You need to increase the friction of doing that habit. If the habit is hard to do, you won't do it, right? If it's hard to start on homework, you're probably not going to get started. If it's hard to exercise, then you're not going to get started. If you make it easy, it becomes a solid habit. If it's hard, you won't do it. And lastly, the reward should be unsatisfying. And how you do this, we're going to actually talk about a bit later, but the idea is to make it as obvious as possible that at the end of the day, all the effort you put into making that habit happen probably isn't really worth that effort. Now, these laws should help you take the habits that you have that we've talked about before in the scorecard and supercharge the ones that you want to have them be good, and the ones that you want to eliminate, inverse the laws and apply them to them. Now, how do you do this is up to you. I don't know what habits you want to break or what habits you want to improve, but the idea here is that you have the laws, you have the way to find them, you have the way to change them, and you have the way to know how to make them solid. You have everything you need, the toolkit, to change your habits in your life, right? Now, how do I stick to a habit? How do you do that? Well, it's a good question, right? And I am 100% certain that the number one question you all have is, how long do I have to do this thing until it becomes a habit? But it's kind of a wrong mentality. You know, thinking about how long you have to do it kind of gives a deadline. And more importantly, there isn't any research that claims that there is a hard fixed deadline up until where you have to do something before it becomes a habit. Yes, there are like 22 days or 45 days until something becomes a habit. There's a ton of research out there, but it isn't specific. So how do you actually change your habit? Well, it's not a question of how long. It's a question of how many. How many times do I have to repeat my activity to actually get it to work, right? How many times do I have to brush my teeth until in the morning I do it automatically? How many times do I have to how many times do I have to eat an apple in the morning until it becomes habitual to do that? And the reason why this is useful is because of a very simple thing. It's a mentality change. Instead of looking at it as a deadline, something far in the future that you have to hit, it's something that happens now. If you do it now, you increase that counter. You increase the amount of repetitions to get closer to the amount that you need to have to become for it to become a habit. If I repeat this 20 times, it sounds better than I have to do this for another 30 days until it becomes a habit. It's all about how you look at it, right? If you look at the process of listing your habits as a game, and you sort of make them and give them positive and negative scores, you can take them and put them around, and it looks cool, right? It feels better to manage and organize your life if you make it a game, rather than if it's just something that you have to do because you have to become better, right? It's a part of you. Repetitions are what reinforce habits, and what's more important is that consistency is key, right? It's more important that you keep doing, however small it is, that specific habit, rather than trying to go big, right? It's more important that you, do one push-up every single day, rather than it is to do 20 push-ups in 1 month, because it's about the number of repetitions. The more repetitions you're able to fit over a certain period of time, the better. But more importantly, the best thing you need to know in order to stick to a habit is that you need to see yourself in your habits. You won't stick to your habits if they're not a part of you, right? For instance, any action that you do over your day sort of defines who you are, right? If you play video games, you would say you're a gamer, right? You wouldn't say you're an athlete. Maybe you would if you also work out, but if the only thing you do is play video games, you wouldn't claim yourself to being an athlete. But if you did repeat workouts every day, then maybe you would become one. More importantly, you would believe in yourself that you actually are a person that works out every day. And this is an important thing. Another important thing that is regarding your mentality change, right? Instead of thinking about, I have to work out every day, reframe it as, I'm a person that works out every day, right? Instead of seeing it as a thing that you have to do to become, view it as a thing that you already have. It's a part of you already, right? I'm a gamer. I play video games. I'm a person that works out every day. I do it anyway. Like, it's just a part of me. These are the things that I can really tell you to sort of not just find out what your habits are, but to improve them as well as to just change your life. These are the things that you actually could do to become a better person, because they fit exactly what we've been talking about all this time, which is what is making them important, which is that habits bring small effects in your life, right? And small effects affect you in the short term as well as the long term. And as you can remember, Steve the caveman from about 30 slides ago was talking about, the fact that, oh yeah, I realized you're Steven. Also, I got distracted. Anyway, Steve the caveman was focused on the short term. And habits are a short-term activity. Hi, King. I didn't see you before. Oh, I get way too easily distracted. Steve the caveman is a short-term oriented person. And so are you, because you're the same person as Steve the caveman. We haven't really evolved much over the past 1,000 years, at least not noticeably, especially in the neural department. So essentially, it's just that Stephen was focused on the short term, and that's what habits do as well. But habits compound. And compounds are very important. Compounds over time are very powerful. If you were to improve 1% by 1% every single day for a whole year, you would be 37 times as better as you were at the beginning of the year, right? Or at the beginning of a period of time, not necessarily at the beginning of the year, because New Year's resolutions suck, as we've talked about before. But the important part here is that if you compound your activities, even though they seem small and short term, and they should be small, that's very important actually, they should be very small changes to compound to big parts of your life. Conversely, if you decrease by 1% in your efficiency, in your productivity, in your power over 365 days, it's a very small number. But you shouldn't be scared, because I can guarantee you that you're not a person that constantly decreases or a person that constantly increases. I can guarantee you that you're a person that oscillates. You're a person that over a couple of days becomes better, or over a couple of days becomes worse. But that's fine. I'm not perfect every day. Nobody's perfect every day. But what's important is that the trend is positive. Your trend is upwards, right? I think, in a way, even reducing the negative trend goes to the positive, because the slope changes to a positive number, right? the more you improve, even however small it might be, it compounds over time, right? The more you change is relative to the amount of small things you change. And that's the important part. You need to think small, not massive. That's why New Year's resolutions are bad. Because if you look at a New Year's resolution, it's like, I want to work out every day for the rest of the year, and that involves so many things. But a small habit, is really what you can functionally accomplish. And that's what you should focus on, right? You should focus on making small changes. Now, where do you start tinkering? Well, I recommend, like I said, to take the easiest thing and the smallest thing first. Instead of trying to change a very big thing about your life, like say, I don't know, your morning routine, try to change a small part of it. Try to change a small part of how you engage with your homework, how you engage with your friends, maybe. Instead of, I don't know, trying to do an entire full body workout every single day, get started with, I don't know, one push-up. Instead of trying to socialize with everybody you know every single day, right? Instead of trying to speak to every single person that you know, maybe try texting a friend one nice thing for one day, every single day, over time. And over time, not only does that bring you small changes, it also changes who you are. Because the more you do a certain thing, the more you identify yourself as doing that thing. The next thing you want to do is you want to reduce the big goals that you have into small steps. Instead of saying, I want to go to the gym, you should clarify what going to the gym actually means. What does it mean? Well, it means putting on your gym clothes, it means getting into your car or electric skateboard or bus or whatever it is that you take to go to the gym, which I know we can't do now, but we will be able to do in the future. It also involves getting there. It involves changing at the gym. It involves actually doing the small parts of the workouts, and then it involves changing back again and then going back home and sitting down in your house. That is what going to the gym actually means. That is what working out actually means. So the more you reduce big wants into small steps, the easier it is to increment those small changes. Instead of trying to say that you're going to do all of your homework today, just get started with one problem. Get started with one small problem, maybe even a sub-problem if a problem is too big. Start with one tiny thing, and I can guarantee you that over time, you will kind of want to do that thing. Because it kind of feels bad to stop. Like if I put on my gym clothes to go work out, I kind of feel obligated to work out. If I am sitting in front of my LaTeX document and I start typing a bunch of words, I kind of feel obligated to finish the problem. And that's how you will feel as well, I'm sure. If you start, that's the hard part. And trying to get started with something big is very hard. You should just get started with something small. Lastly, you should only improve one thing at a time. Don't try to commit. Don't try to change 3 habits at a time. Only change one. Only consistently do one thing every single day over a couple of months. Because that's a lot easier than trying to do 2 things or 3 things or 10 things at the same time every single day for a month, right? In this case, I recommend you start at one thing at a time. If you do think that you have amount of willpower, if you do think you have enough, maybe do 2. But I would recommend you do that. I'd recommend you start small with one thing. King, you don't just procrastinate. I'm sure you do other things, and I got distracted again. Also, I would like to clarify that the small steps part also helps with the changing habits thing we talked about earlier. I kind of forgot to mention that before, but I did now. So, what's next to talk about? Well, if you really liked this topic that I've been talking about right now, we're not done yet. We're getting to part 2, which is going to be much smaller than part 1. I recommend you read this book, Atomic Habits by James Clear. This is probably the best book I've ever read when it comes to self-help. Yes, Tiffany, well done for knowing it. Most of the slides you saw earlier are a very powerful summary of the book. Personally, the things I found helpful. And I think you should really read this book. If you haven't read it, it's a very good read. And, King, what were you saying? Yes, I've read The Power of Habit, but it's not really, it's not really a good book that I would want to read in general. Mostly because it's too abstract. It's a good read, but I think it's a better read after you read Atomic Habits, honestly, at least in my opinion. But the idea is that the book goes into a lot more detail about these things that I've been talking about, and it gives you very good advice. I recommend you read it in your free time if you can. And if you don't want to read, get the audiobook. At least that way you can listen to it while you're doing anything else. Atomic Habits is a good book, and however, I would like to warn that if you feel like you've got enough information to go off of from these slides, don't read the book. Because if you read the book, you'll be far more focused on reading the book and feeling like you're making progress rather than actually making progress. If you think that you can probably get started with improving your life with the slides that you just saw, you should probably do that instead rather than reading the book. But if you're interested, there's a link in the slides, and you can check them after the whole workshop. The slides, I don't think I put them in the show notes right now, but it's acmurl.com/getthisbread. So there you go. Now we're going to get to part 2. But before we get there, I want to ask you a question. What would you try to make a habit first? By the way, because I kind of sort of forgot to mention this, if you'll have a habit and you miss a day, get started the next day. Don't stop doing it entirely. It's more important to keep doing the habit, even if you miss a day, than it is to get yourself down by doing it. All right. There's some good suggestions in the chat, like, for instance, fixing your sleep schedule, which we're going to talk about. But I think that all of these ideas have a good point. But I think you should also focus on other aspects as well. Really focusing on work as a good habit is just not necessarily a good idea, because work is a pretty mentally taxing job, and I think there are other things that people should focus on when prioritizing habits in general. Which is why I'm going to be introducing a system, and this is a system I came up with long ago, but somebody sort of beat me to it with this workshop. There's videos of it on YouTube, generally. But we're going to talk about the quarter system. Yes, the quarter system, but for life. Yes, the quarter system, academically, is a pretty interesting concept. I kind of like it, but this is a different quarter system. It's not actually the thing that you think it is. Too long didn't read about what the quarter system is your life in 4 words, right? Your life can be reduced to 4 critical aspects, right? Let me just turn on my notes real quick. Kind of crashed on me. The idea is that every section of this system is designed to deal with a part of your life, right? Your life can be decomposed in these 4 words, and each quarter deals with a part of your life. And the idea here is to use your habits to improve this system in a specific way, in such that you can build upon it later on. Yes, Stephen. He got to me before I could do this, sadly, and I have to drink because I saw that. Now, there's a specific environment for each of these setups. You need them to be separate because, very importantly, your environments don't need to mix, right? You shouldn't work where you also relax, because then you will combine them in your brain and the cues for your habits will combine. That's never good, right? The important part here is to use your cues and your environments as a way to link into your habits, which you've already streamlined, in order to get started on certain parts of your life, right? These are the 4 quarters, right? It's a beautiful pie chart, right? And let's talk about the 4 words, which are exercise, sleep, relaxation, and creation. As we've talked about, some of you realize that a particular individual, CGP Gray, got ahead to me. I'll actually link his video in the slides after this workshop, because he also does a better job at explaining this than I do. But this idea has been around for a longer time than CGP Gray's video, particularly because the idea of improving your life in certain parts is regards to the fact that we have different parts of our brain, 2 halves, your mathematical half and your artistic half. You're very prone for these things. And also, it's very important to realize that our brains are very complicated, and it's more important to get started with creating habits for other parts, such as exercise. Yes, exercising is annoying, but I would like to clarify something here. The idea isn't to work out. the idea is to be physical, right? Physical effort is essential. You're a human being, right? You have muscles, bones, you are a thing that exists. And the idea is to move. The idea is to be active, to move around in your house, to work out to some level, right? No, King, you can't import exercise, sadly. And I have to do it again. But the idea here is that very small things count as physical effort. And in these trying times of quarantine, we kind of forgot about exercise, didn't we? Right? I mean, you don't really go outside and walk anymore. You probably don't even go to the gym anymore. But it's still important to do those things because a healthy mind also requires a healthy body. And if you don't exercise, you will end up sort of becoming very non-physical, and you might end up finding it hard to get out of bed in the morning. Now, like I said, exercise is important, but I really want to focus that I'm not talking about workouts. I'm talking about physical effort, right? It's hard to work out, but walking counts as physical effort, especially during these times of quarantine. So you should start with that, right? Small things lead to bigger things. And it's also important not to overcomplicate your exercise. Instead of going with super confusing workouts, you should start simple, right? Start with a very small thing. Maybe, I don't know, get started with walking around in your living room for 10 minutes, making laps, right? Or even in your bedroom. However small of a space you have, just a tiny bit of effort is enough to get your new kick started. Now, my advice for you to get started is actually pretty cool. Set up a space. However small it is, doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter what the space has. What's important is that it's an empty space, a space where you only exercise. I personally have the luck to have a gym mat, which is right behind me. And it's right in this room, the room where I work in. And it's in a very small part of the room, right? But it's a part of the room that I never touch unless I am exercising, right? Oh, damn it. Anyway, like I said, you don't even need a mat. Next, you need to set a time of day for your exercise. Just pick any time. Even if it is 10 p.m., it's better for you to move about at 10 p.m. than it is to not move at all. Although if you are to pick a time, you should probably pick the morning. Because physical effort wakes you up. It gets you endorphins. It gets you running. And if you, well, not physically running, figuratively running, right? Also, although it could get you physically running. But the important part is that it gets you awake in the sense that your brain enters a baseline where you can start working, right? And like I said before, with habits, start small, increase with time. Start with 1 push-up and increase to 2 push-ups or 3 push-ups if it gets better. Only walk for a minute, and if you can actually do that for a minute, then keep doing it for more, right? Much like habits. Now, if you end up reaching the point where you can actually do decent amounts of habits, like workouts, and if you feel like you're not really doing a lot and it feels like the physical effort doesn't really reach up to your standard, you can search on YouTube, like so many workouts. But you can go to like anything, or you can go with ab workouts, arm workouts. But if you feel like you can do it, you should start small, like I said, maybe with just a minute of walking every day. But you should also think about improving. And if you end up improving to the point where you feel like you're not really doing well, YouTube is good for workouts. If you don't have weights in your house, which you might not, because not everybody buys weights, I would recommend you check out r/bodyweightfitness on Reddit. They have tons of workouts that only involve using yourself. Most of them do involve pull-ups, which require a bar, but there are also workouts that don't require that either. But it's a good start and a good resource to get yourself doing some decent amounts of exercise. Now what's next? Sleep. And I want to talk about sleep because sometimes I look at this and I really think about it, and it kind of makes me realize how many people sort of go to bed at 4 a.m. Not necessarily everybody here. I'm not calling you out specifically. Even I have gone to bed at 6 a.m. in the morning for no reason other than that I'm a teen and I want to rebel against my parents. But what is really important to remember here is that sleep hygiene is to some extent important. And there are many main benefits to maintaining it, like memory, motivation, willpower, health. There's tons of research out there that talks about sleep and that how you should actually care about sleep, right? And really, I think the more important part, especially now if you get started, isn't to sleep in the sense of, just like trying to go to bed early. I would recommend you set an actual bedtime first, right? Bedtime is more important to be set than it is to be set early. If you guys want to go to 4 a.m. to sleep every day, it's fine by me. What's important is that you keep doing it, because you have this thing called the circadian rhythm, which is a part of your body that checks what time it is during the day naturally. And if you keep going to sleep at different times, it's kind of bad for you. It ends up kind of screwing with your system. And if you keep a consistent circadian rhythm, you will end up feeling a lot better than if you have a weird, janky sleep schedule. Even if it is at a late time, just go to bed at the same time every day, even if it is 4 a.m. Although I would recommend, if you can, to go to bed early. Not 10 p.m. like the good boy here. Maybe go to bed 11 p.m., Now, how do you get started? Well, only sleep in the area where you actually sleep. Don't check your phone. Don't watch Netflix. Don't do anything else in your bed aside from sleeping. That way, when you go into bed, you will end up being focused on sleeping. You will form a habit out of sleeping, right? You will end up being in bed, and that ends up being the cue for your body to initiate the sleeping process. Like I said before, never pass your bedtime. Very important to not do that, because if you end up passing your bedtime, you're kind of screwing your consistency and the circadian rhythm, and we've already talked about this before. And lastly, if you can't fall asleep in the 30 minutes of you getting into bed, go away. Don't stay in bed and try to fall asleep, and don't stay in bed trying to think about how you're trying to fall asleep. Get up, move about, and if you end up being sleepy, go back to bed. Don't stay in bed and try to sleep. Go to bed specifically for sleeping. Like I said, do come back later if you are sleepy. Don't end up sitting awake all the time. Next up is relaxation, which I'm sure many of you are very acquainted with. Now, I would like to clarify that relaxation is important, and you should give it the same amount of attention as you do to your schoolwork, right? I'm not saying remove relaxation from your life, because you can't do that. But what I am saying is to give as much focus to it as you would to your work. Instead of thinking of it as a chore to work, or as a chore to focus on relaxing, think of it as a way to make your relaxing more powerful. You work hard, you play hard, right? The idea is that if you are very good at relaxing, then you will end up being even more productive when you actually work, right? Because quality recreation can be useful to sort of also give your brain another baseline. A baseline without stress. A baseline where you can just chill, I would also like to clarify that socializing is essential. Go on Discord. Chat with anybody in ACM. Or give a Zoom call to your parents or other friends that you might have. Maybe you're not on good terms with your parents. But in general, it's good to socialize. We are social beings, and you had more social encounters back in the good old days of no coronavirus than you do now. Now you're home. But I would at least recommend you, just a bit of a chat, at least. It's important to socialize, because believe it or not, you socialize more before than you might have thought. How do you get started with relaxing? Well, during your assigned relaxation time, avoid stress factors. This includes work, whatever that might entail, but it also includes news. Don't try to read the news when you're relaxing. The news is not exactly good for you when you're relaxing, because it sort of focuses your attention on all the wrong things. It focuses your attention on all the bad things in the world, and it stresses you out. And stress and anxiety are things you want to avoid during your relaxation time. Like I said, avoid work, but also come up with fun hobbies. For instance, one of my very fun hobbies is the cube. It's totally unrelated to my work. It's a thing that I do to relax. Maybe you have other hobbies that you might find fun, aside from trying to learn how to solve a Rubik's Cube. But the important part is to have them, right? They can be anything, but it's up to you. However, you should also remember to moderate, to increase the quality of your relaxation time. If you spend all of your time relaxing, you will end up exhausting the resources you use to relax. If you end up binging all of the Netflix shows you have, you won't have any more Netflix shows to watch. And your relaxation time will become sort of like ambiguous. You might end up watching the next video on YouTube and not really focusing on it. The idea is to have quality relaxation time. And if you run out of it, it ends up not being fun. Lastly, we're going to talk about creation. Because work isn't the only creative thing you do. You also play the piano. You also draw. You also are perhaps a staff or board member of ACM. Perhaps you are just part of a group of friends that is trying to work on a side project. There are a lot of things that you do that are not necessarily work, that you should consider creation. Instead of looking at work as just this, like an annoying thing, look at it as sort of a more, I don't know how to put this in a way that might really resonate with people. But the idea is to look at it as a positive aspect, instead of looking at it as a negative one, right? Instead of looking at work as something that you have to do, look at it as a part of your creation. Look at it as a part of the aspects of your life that stimulate your intellect. Look at it as the part of your life that gets you feeling like you're a big brain person, right? Not just work, also lead code, also cubing, also drawing, other things that you do, right? But it's important to not combine with relaxation, because if you do, the lines will blur. And if the lines blur, your habits blur, and you'll end up doing things that you don't know you are actually doing, if you end up being automatic, that is. My advice is to be honest with yourself when you're working. If you find yourself losing yourself and not really working, step away. Just get up out of your seat. And if you end up watching YouTube while you're doing your homework, just get up and go relax. Because if you start, like I said, mendling your creation time with your relaxation, it will end up not really gelling as well, right? You'll end up mixing your habits. Lastly, design your environment for maximum creation. Don't allow any distractions in the area where you evolve your big brain skills, right? I have nothing on this table right now that would distract me from showing you this workshop. Everything on this table is intricately placed in order to help me with the workshop. I have my iPad here to help me talk to you. I have my water here to assist in the drinking game. I have my papers there, which I use for a tickler to put paper documents in for a whole other thing we're going to talk about. Everything on this table has a purpose. There is no switch. There's no Nutella. There's no food. And actually no food while you're working, in my opinion. But that's a totally different thing. So, we have the quarter system. But you might have noticed that I put it in a very specific order. Exercise, sleep, recreation, creation. Right? It's very important to engage in this order. Because there are two layers to your work. Physical and mental. It's far easier to get started on fixing your physical aspect of your life. Because the physical is very obvious. It's very clear. There isn't any abstract constants. Whereas the mental part might also be affected by other factors, like say anxiety, stress, lack of sleep, or perhaps even depression, if you might have that kind of issue. The idea is that the physical brings you to a baseline. And that baseline is really what's important. And then you can work on the mental aspects of your life. So, what's the big takeaway? What's the whole point of this workshop, aside from being productive? Well, I would like to talk about a quote. Life is about the journey, not the destination. Does anybody know who said this? Probably not. And I will tell you why you don't know who the person said this is. It's because nobody knows. It was a quote that got entered into modern circulation in the 1920s. Fun fact. A quote everybody uses, but nobody has any idea where it's from. But the point here is that your life isn't a series of stories of you following a goal. It's what happens in between, the system in which you deal with your everyday life. And it's important to know that because every person is unique and everyone has a different journey through life, which is why not everybody can deal with things in the same way, right? Every person, however, is human. Every person has a system, but everyone that you know is human. So we have a standard baseline, and I gave you that baseline. Habits are something that we all have, something that we all can share, and something that we all can improve. And more importantly, we all have to sort of move, we all have to sleep, we all have to relax, and we all have to work. The system doesn't give you details on how to do things. Everything that I've given you gives you the tools of how to deal with everything, right? We all look for different things, which is why I can't tell you exactly what you should do to get there. Only you know that. Only you know what you want. But I gave you the blueprint of how to get there. Everybody in the world is trying to give you an already made system. And in a way, I am as well, right? A good example is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is probably the most popular self-help book of all time. And I hated it because it had nothing to do with me as a nice college student. It was specifically a book for the corporate environment. More importantly, even for CEOs. And yeah, sure, it's fun to read, but it doesn't really help me. It's very important to know that everyone is unique, right? And your system is different from mine. But like I said, I gave you the blueprint to get there. And the most important thing is to improve, not to undo. Take everything that you have now and accept it. It's a part of you. Instead of trying to undo it and become a person that you are not, improve upon it. Simply take the things that you have and work with them. Change them incrementally, slowly, day by day, until you end up being the person that you want to be. Never go back, only forward. Additionally, optimize, don't overhaul. I used to overhaul my system of how to be productive every 2 months, and I would realize that every time I would overhaul it, I would completely lose all motivation. Or even more importantly, I would just simply not be the same person, right? Optimize the things you already have. And believe me, eventually, you will end up reaching the point where you are the best version of yourself that you can be. Everything in life is either a goal or a thing that you do to achieve that goal. And everybody focuses on the goal. We focus on getting grades. We focus on looking good. We focus on being accepted by the people around us. But if you achieve that goal, what then? You find another goal, right? But that's not the way it goes. It's more important to have a system to reach your goal. It's more important to have a thing that you love to do that gets you to the places that you want to be in. Because if you love your everyday life, if you love waking up in the morning, getting active in whatever it is that you want to do, that's the important part, because that every single day is what affects you in the long run. And if you love every single day, that will compound, and eventually you will love your life. You will have an organized life. You should love your system, not the goals that you get out of it. You should love the things that you do when you wake up in the morning. You should love drinking your coffee. You should love whenever you do your homework. That is the important part. And I know loving doing your homework kind of seems like a stupid thing to say, but it's more about what happens in the rest. Nobody can love their work, but you can love how you approach it. I didn't give you a system. I gave you a blueprint of how to construct your own. And that's up to you, because you need to love your system. That is solely what is important. And if you do that, I can guarantee you'll become the productive person that you should be. So, what's next? Well, tools and techniques. I won't really go into every one of these for detail because you can research tutorials about these online. But what are these? Well, they're fairly established parts of systems. Some people use them, some people don't. You might find them useful, which is why I'm presenting them to you. Every one of these slides will have a problem, a process, and a solution. Something you get out of it, right? Kind of like the cue, routine, and the reward part of your habits. The idea here is for you to check out these slides, look at them later on, and see if any one of these systems might be useful to you as a habit, something that you can improve, right? We'll start off with pros and cons for each one of them, and we'll talk about every one of them and what they affect. First off, a calendar. Everybody has a calendar because everybody is constrained by events. Everybody has to keep track of their schedule, and keeping track of them can be cumbersome. which is why, and planning your day can be hard about it, right? Which is why calendars exist. The solution is the time block. Every single thing that you want to do, you add it to your calendar. The picture you see on the right is actually what I have in my calendar for this week's Monday and Tuesday, and you might even notice the productivity workshop over there. The idea is to define clearly at what time you will be doing what thing, or at least some vague aspect of it. The pros is that it sorts out the issue of time. You will know when you do a specific thing and when. But you need to be honest with yourself, because otherwise you won't trust your calendar. If you can't wake up at 7 in the morning, like I do in my calendar, don't put your time block for the morning routine at 7 in the morning. Put it later. Put it at the time that you actually wake up. Respect your calendar, but also make sure that it actually represents you as a person. Also, it's good because it allows you to set up events with other people that also have calendars. So it kind of compounds into a far better effect in the long term. The cons is that you might feel pressured by your calendar. You might feel pressured to do the specific thing your calendar says, but you should see your calendar as a guideline, not as, a thing that you do to spook yourself into working. Next up is our to-do lists. It's another basic thing that you can have, and they solve a very simple problem, which is that you have a lot to get done and you don't know where to start. It's about reducing the task that is really big into a smaller, more compact task, right? If you do that, you will end up being more likely to get started on your tasks. There are tons of to-do applications out there. I don't want to talk about which one you should pick. Every one of them is different. You can research these things yourself, right? But the idea is to split tasks into subtasks and use your to-do list to track those. Instead of just saying, do my CSE 20 homework, define what that means. Do problem 1, 2, 3, 4 with subsets A, B, C, D. Do them at certain times, at certain places, at my computer. Like you notice, I have times assigned to each task, as well as a tag, which says where I can do it. It also makes it more obvious what you should be doing in order to progress your goal, and it makes it really cool. The pros are that you will never forget to do anything, because the list will remember for you. And also, you will always know what to do next, right? Because your list will tell you how to do that. And combined with your calendar, you will know when to do it as well. The cons is that the complexity of your to-do list can go up very quickly. I remember how my to-do list system got so convoluted once every 6 months that I kind of never kept track of it anymore. Keep it simple. It's tasks, subtasks, maybe categories for your tasks. That's it. You don't need more if you're getting started. That's for sure. Next up, we have extension training, which is a useful workout technique for the person who does more than one push-up a day. The idea is that figuring out workout reps is annoying if you're the kind of person that tries to be as fit as possible, which is why I have an algorithm for you of how to figure that out. Do 10 reps of whatever it is that you want to do, and then take a 10-second rest. And do that until the exercise is instinct. Do it until you can no longer do that thing. The idea is to do 10 reps of push-ups and then stop. 10 reps, stop. 10 reps, stop. 10 reps, stop. And then, if you can't do any more, move on to the next exercise that you want to do. Like I said, this is designed for people who are not getting started with workouts. It's designed for those who want to improve even further and have found that the workouts the techniques that I've suggested no longer are useful to them to become more fit. The pros is that you will always push yourself to the limit of improvement. But the bad part is that you will have a muscle fever so bad you will not be able to work out every single day, which is why you need to split your workouts over days. I work my abs out every Monday, then my biceps every Tuesday, and then every Wednesday I do my legs, never skip leg day, so on and so forth. Pretty important to do that. Next up is gamification. The picture on the right is my favorite application to recommend to people getting started, which is Habitica. It's literally a game. However, you win points in the game by actually doing things in real life. The idea is that it gives you a motivational kickstart to actually start going on in the habit. And it is completely unrelated to the habit itself. It's a reward that is satisfying, but has nothing to do with the actual habit, right? You gain levels in Habitica. You gain rewards in the game. You can play multiplayer. You can have multiple people contribute in raids. It's this whole complex thing. And the more you respect your habits, the better you are in the game. The pros here is that you can supercharge your craving. Your craving will get associated with getting those points in Habitica, which you might become sort of attached to. But that's really the important part that I want to talk about here, which is Goodhart's law. When a measure is trying to be optimized, it ceases to be a good measure. If you try to improve the points in Habitica, you might try to cheat. You might try to say, oh, I didn't eat vegetables today, so I'm just going to push that button anyway, just so I can get my Habitica points. If that happens, you've successfully ruined Habitica. And that happens with any metric. If you sort of try to optimize the metric, you'll end up screwing everything else. Getting things done is a methodology that the corporate environment uses to get things done, as the name suggests. A flowchart of information processing is on the right. It's a very established system written by David Allen. If you want to read his book, you are welcome to do so, or his audiobook. Personally, I've used this for a while, and it was very powerful. Not only powerful, it was tested and proven. It was so intensely part of every single to-do app that I've ever used that I couldn't believe it. However, it was hard to get started with no experience, and I realized that. If you don't have other habits, trying to get into getting things done is very difficult because it's a very complex system that is solely for advanced productivity experts, right? If you have your life decently organized and use a to-do list and a calendar, you may want to use getting things done. Next up is bullet journaling. I highly recommend this for anybody here. Bullet journaling helps you with connecting yourself with your past and your future self because you're writing things down on a piece of paper that you can check later. It also helps with the desire to memorize details about your everyday life. If you want to remember details about a person or just memories about a certain day, you can write them down in your journal. Bulletjournal.com covers the details of bullet journaling, which are pretty cool, personally. I used this for a while, and the pro is that it's very aesthetic. You can make it look in whatever way you want. And I have seen some very beautiful bullet journals from people that I know who have used them that are nice and colored, and they're engaging, right? It's fun to fill up a bullet journal and help yourself with it. It's also supercharged note-taking because you do it very quickly and very well. If you do find that bullet journaling has a pretty bad con, it's paper-based, and I don't think there is a very good digital alternative. I don't think there is any alternative for bullet journaling, actually, in the digital environment. And my advice for you is very simple when it comes to this. Use a note-taking application that is freeform, like Evernote or Notion, perhaps. Sleep tracking. If you're the kind of person that wants to get into the territory of overkill, like I am, the sleep tracking is definitely right up your alley. Because believe it or not, sleep can suck. Sleep can feel bad every once in a while. You might wake up in the middle of the night and you might not know why. Sleep tracking can help you. There are many sleep applications out there. I can't personally tell you which one to use because, like to-do list applications, each one is different, and whatever is important to you is up to you. But I would recommend you sleep track yourself for 1 week and try to see what issues you may have, right? Maybe at some period of time you realize that you wake up naturally because the sunrise happens. This particular entry is actually a very good example of an issue. You might notice that my heart rate spikes right after the sunrise. This was me waking up right after sunrise. The time tracker does say I slept 8 hours, but during that time I was not sleeping. I was awake. And it helped me realize the issue with sunrise, which is to close blinds, get a nice mask. And yeah, sure, you could know this, but there are other problems that you might have with sleeping that you might want to improve, and sleep tracking will help you with that. It's a data-driven approach at optimizing your sleep, and I'm sure you like data science if you're a data science major, and sleep tracking applications can help you with that. The obvious downside is that you need a phone or a smartwatch in your bed, which might conflict with any other habits you might have, such as checking your phone before going to bed or after going into bed. And additionally, there's the problem of radiation, but most sleep tracking applications don't require anything but Bluetooth, which is already present in your life and is low frequency, so you probably are fine there. Also turn on airplane mode. There's that. Lastly, there's time tracking. This is overkill. Don't do this if you're getting started. This is my time entry for the last week, and it shows you everything that I did and how much time it took. You can also open them up and show you the amount of time I spent for every single task. And what does this help you with? Well, it helps you with the fact that time is relative to every person. You might think you spent half an hour working on your math homework and then come to realize you actually spent 2 hours. You might think you only spend time watching, that one YouTube video, and you end up realizing that you actually spent 4 hours binging Netflix or whatever it is that you're doing. Time tracking can help you with that because it's an external method of tracking your time, which helps you see what you actually do during your day and whether it correlates with your calendar or whether it correlates with any other activities as well. You can also use this to investigate at the weekly review, which is pretty cool. The weekly review is the thing that I use to make sure that I see what I do every week. I look at what I did before, and then I look at what I did and what I want to do in the next week. And time tracking helps with that. For instance, in my opinion, I spent way too little time on Math 20C last week. 4 hours only, as opposed to the 10 hours I spent on the very next thing, which is CSU 30. In this example, I will, for certain this week, be working a lot more on my math homework, as well as other things as well. The pros is that you can find weak spots in focus as well, and optimize the time you spent. The con is that it's overkill, like I said before. Maybe you can't do it. Maybe it takes too much time out of your actual time to track your time. But there are ways to help this out. You can use certain applications. You can use series shortcuts. But again, like I said, for advanced users only. Also, Tiffany, to answer your question, I used Toggle, and I got distracted. The last thing I want to show you is accountability buddies, and actually why you use this. The problem with all these things is that it's difficult to maintain a contract with yourself. You might want to try finding excuses on how to sort of weasel out of doing things, right? Your brain tries to find excuses to get you back into bad habits. And it's also difficult to stay positive in times when it might be difficult to follow your habits. This is why I would recommend you have a buddy improve with you. Have another person you know. I need to turn on my light. I'm sorry about that. Have another person you know that you like and that you find that they also want to improve. Try to get themselves, more active. Try to find something together that you want to improve together, right? Make a contract. Make it fun. Say, I want to spend more time, walking my dog outside, right? And maybe Tiffany here wants to spend more time working on her homework, right? And we can make a contract. If I don't walk the dog in this house 2 hours every day, you get to, take $10 out of my bank account. That's a bad idea. But it's an example of what you can do as a contract, right? Financial incentive is pretty cool. Although I know what you're going to say, you don't have no money. But it's fine. You can pick anything as long as it's fun. Not only is it positively reinforcing to socialize with somebody and show your progress, right? It also helps with commitment, right? They can provide you support. And they can provide you, just a nice feeling about you having improved. They can help you. Be like, well done, congrats. The cons? Well, there isn't any. You get to socialize. You get to sort of just have fun. You get to improve. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want, you can ask your bit or your byte to do this thing with you. Maybe, you can get to the bit-byte program to become something like this. Perhaps, again, if you want to. If your byte or bit wasn't here, show them this workshop, and maybe they would want to join you. Now, we're done with all the things I wanted to say. But I have questions for you. What should your system be like? Because I don't know what you want, but I'm sure that you all have questions, right? Now, I would like to make a specific format as to how to answer your questions. You ask personalized questions if you want to. I will give you tailored pointers as to where to start and how to improve the certain thing that you're asking about, whether it be habits or in another way. And also, whichever habit or thing or question I might find that is useful ends up being asked, I will add it here. You can ask it in chat, but I will also unmute you all so that you may also speak if you're not really interested in typing. So Let's start off with the very first question, which is the question about calendars. Bryce asks, what do you do if you run overtime, i.e. you blocked off 3 hours to do your CSE 20 homework, and now that 3 hours is done and you still haven't finished that CSE 20 homework? I read 30 the first time? Probably. Well, I have an advice for you. Stick to your calendar. Instead of, this honestly depends on what you want to do. If you truly believe that you cannot finish the CSE homework tomorrow, then do it today. Take whatever it is that you blocked off in your calendar after the CSE 20 homework and replace it with your CSE 20 homework time block. If you do end up having time to solve your homework, which can happen, simply respect your calendar. Stop working and come back to it tomorrow. Chances are that break might actually get you to think about it for a bit and actually get you to be able to solve the problem better tomorrow. I remember when I sat down in my CSE homework for 3 hours trying to think what I did wrong in my assembly assignment. Then I walked away and I came back and I realized I was just missing one single statement of code. Once I fixed it, everything was done. Respect your calendar as much as you can. If you need more time, block off that time if you're going into overtime. And replace that time block you had before with something else and put it in another day. If you can't, if you can defer it, just keep going. Any other questions?
What did I miss? Are the slides online? Where are they?
The slides will be on acmurl.com/getthisbread. Siri rang again.
acmurl.com. Get this bread?
Yes, get this bread. As in, let's get this bread, because I want you all to improve. Bryce is popping off with the productivity questions. I would like other people to ask questions as well. How do you differentiate to-do lists and GTD? I've seen a lot of apps that purport to be a to-do list and at the same time do GTD stuff too. Oh, oh well, good that I didn't get distracted. GTD involves different things. You know, it involves not just the to-do list aspect, but also document processing, among other things. My recommendation is to take the to-do aspect out of the GTD and put it in your to-do list, and anything else, put it in another application. For instance, the document processing part, taking it into your note-taking application. A good example of that. Separate them using different applications or different processes for each part of GTD. Although it is true that a very important aspect of GTD is the to-do list. So that is an important part of it as well. Tiffany asked, how do you focus in a distracted environment? I recall you asking this question a couple of weeks ago, and I said wear noise-canceling headphones. And that's true. You could do that. My advice would be to do something different. If you know you can't work during the times that you have distracting noises in your time, try to put something else in there. Instead of trying to do your homework during the time that you have distractions, try doing something else. If you have lectures, well, that's too bad. But maybe try putting time in there to, I don't know, exercise or relax. Maybe you could try watching YouTube because you can't focus on your homework. I mean, you said that you have drilling noises from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 potential hours of work, right? You could try going to bed from midnight to 8 p.m. That's 8 hours of sleep. That's pretty good. And then from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., do things that are unrelated to schoolwork. And afterwards, at 6 p.m., just get started on school. The idea is to try to minimize the distractions, right? If you can't really deal with the distractions at hand when it comes to, you know, the drilling noises, just try to just move them someplace else. Do something else in the meantime.
Matei, I'm looking at some of your slides. Did you take some of this from CGP Grey?
Yes, the quarter system, sadly, was a thing that I was researching long ago, but CGP Grey beat me to making the video. So yes, you will find many recurrences of the slides from other videos and books that I may have read. Mostly because I'm not gonna lie, I'm not like a very I can't say that I came up with these things, right? But what I can say is that I came up with the fact that you should combine them, right? I gave you the blueprints of how you should do these things, and if you actually listen to the workshop, you will actually listen to the step-by-step guides as to how to engage into improving yourself with the combination of those two aspects, which in my opinion are very effective ways of organizing your life. Creating habits, establishing a baseline system of how to process all of the tasks you have at hand, which should become subconscious. Lastly, prioritizing critical aspects of you for your human functioning in order to leave room for higher level tasks, such as, well, I don't know, work or anything else you might want to do.
Bye, good luck with your drug habits.
Gonna go start a drug habit? That is kind of bad, King. Actually, what was the response to the running overtime question? Either block off the time after the overtime question to keep going with the time you have when it comes to doing homework, or simply stop and doing it tomorrow. Sean, come on.
What?
All right, I'm doing that. We're still recording, so kind of interrupting me. It's fine. Let's see. Kendall, what's wrong? What do you mean, wait a second? So, Ishan, you weren't being recorded, but you asked that how do you actually spend the time to plan out a calendar, right? You think it takes a lot of time to plan out your day? That was the question you had, basically?
Uh-huh.
Well, I have some bearing news for you, which is that I have a very complicated productivity system, right? As you probably noticed, a bunch of overkill tactics. And I can tell you how much time I actually spent per week reviewing my productivity scales. And as you might have seen it in one of my previous slides, let me actually go there. At the bottom of the list is the amount of time I spend reviewing my productivity stack, including calendar, to-do lists, time tracking, etc.
That in hours? 1 hour and 47 minutes?
An hour and 45 minutes is how much I spend doing these things every week. An hour and 47 minutes of checking my calendar every day. An hour and 47 minutes of reviewing every day. And that's mostly it. Really, it doesn't take that long. And believe it or not, time blocking using Google Calendar is actually very quick. You just select an area, add your stuff, and you're done. The initial time that you spend adding your schedule out and all of your events, that can take a while. But the amount of time blocking your day is very low effort, takes very little time, is very easy to do, and is actually very helpful, in my opinion at least. Like I said, it takes me 5 minutes. Probably doesn't take that much to you. Maybe 10. But I think you can probably spend 10 minutes in your day to possibly optimize any other part of your day, which might gain you a lot of extra time. Tiffany asked something. What about following through with something? I tried to do a thing where I work on every assignment for 30 minutes the day it's assigned. And I've already been following through for CSE 12 and 21, and not for Math 18 and 109. Well, that's a very good question. How do you follow through with something? Well, it's about making it a habit to follow through, right? Let's construct a habit of working on a certain task every day, right? So let's say your queue is, you say that you have the time blocking queue, right? The time blocking queue is very cool, right? Let me take my calendar out and show you. Wait, actually, you probably can't see anything. Never mind. So you time block your stuff out so you know what to follow through with your homework. That's your cue. But my question for you is, what's your craving? What do you get if you do your homework? You need to have a reward that helps you, right? But it needs to be unrelated to homework. It shouldn't be something that sort of deals with your own. A sense of satisfaction isn't enough, in my opinion, because you might end up conflicting with that with your homework. It needs to be something more clear. What if you reward yourself with, say, I don't know, a nice hot bath? Maybe you like taking nice baths, with a bathtub or something. Maybe you have something that you enjoy in your free time that you don't do as much. Maybe try to associate a nice reward that is unrelated to the topic of working on an assignment with the habit of working on an assignment. That way you can sort of establish a craving to get there. Maybe not trying to do it with another bad habit, because then you're just kicking the can down the road. But try it with something else. For instance, I have a reward system set in which I increase the amount of time I spend relaxing the next day by 5 minutes with every single task I knock off my to-do list. And it adds up pretty quickly. So there's that. Of course, if I end up having too much relaxation time in one day, I just kick it down the road to perhaps the weekend. Good way to catch habits you might not consciously notice. Well, for instance, you should think about times when your mind blanks. I have times when my mind blanks. Like I showed you before, the example of flicking a light switch. You don't think about it, you just do it. But there are things that you do during your day that if you really focus on using the habit scorecard, you will notice. Like for instance, if you carry a piece of paper in your hand and a pen throughout the day and mark out what you kind of want to end up doing and what you actually end up doing, you will notice subconscious habits because you're bringing to the front line what you are very doing at that moment. A good example would be if you're alone in your dorm, possibly, or not, try to think about the thing you're about to do. Say, for instance, I'm about to eat a cookie, and I'm going to say, I'm about to eat a cookie. And then I write it down in my habit scorecard, right? Again, you don't have to do the habit scorecard thing every day. You just have to do it once. But the idea is that you notice subconscious habits by just seeing them, right? Like, oh, I'm eating a cookie. Oh, I'm drinking coffee. Oh, I'm doing this thing. If you save them, you will very likely notice them. A similar thing can be done with debugging in CS. Put a rubber ducky in front of your computer screen and talk to it when you're debugging your code, and you might find things that you subconsciously thought they were part of you faster. Bryce asked a very long question. I got a to-do list with categories for various things. How do you think I should decide what things to add to the to-do list and what things I shouldn't? For example, brushing your teeth is something you shouldn't add. Like, for example, you need to modify the way my monitors are plugged in my laptop to solve a certain problem. So you're asking essentially what should you put in the to-do list and what you shouldn't put in your to-do list. Well, I have advice for you. I think everything should be put in a to-do list, but spending the time to put things in your to-do list is probably not worth it for everything. But what's the baseline for something not being worth inserting in your to-do list? Well, it's something that is super fast and super simple that there's no point in delaying, right? It's the 2-minute rule, which is part of GTD, actually. If whatever it is that you want to do takes 2 minutes, do it now. If you have, say, if you have to change your monitors up for your computer and you really have to do that, do it now. It probably won't take you longer than 2 minutes. Again, it's important to not do too many things that last 2 minutes because you'll just get distracted by small tasks. But the idea is, if you can do the thing now, do it now. And if you can't, then chances are you wouldn't have done it anyway. So you should put that in your to-do list. If you can do things at the moment in 2 minutes, do them. If not, put them in your to-do list. That's my way of doing things personally. Any other questions? Let's see. Anybody interested, perhaps? What's GTD? It's a methodology. It's a book. You can read the book, Getting Things Done by David Allen. It's essentially it's an established system of how to deal with things that you should do. The reason why I didn't recommend it at first is that it's very complicated and it's a very long thing to read. And you shouldn't do that if you don't have the inherent habits involved with being productive. You need to at first set and establish cues in your life that bring you to the idea of checking your productivity stack, which is just the things that you use to maintain your organization in your life, which you definitely need. GTD is a thing that you can plug into that, but first you need to establish the habit of doing that, which requires a very simple to-do list or something very simple. GTD is something that you can implement later. It's sort of an intermediate thing. If this workshop is productivity 10, GTD is productivity 101. How does it work? It's so many things. It's a book. You really have to read the book. It also involves that flowchart that I talked about earlier. Let me get there. This flowchart is a very small aspect of how you deal with information processing in your life, and it's essentially the core part of GTD. But every single part of those squares is an entire thing to talk about, and talking about it in a workshop now is probably not a fun thing. If you want, I can host a workshop on GTD, but it's definitely out of the scope of today. But if you want, like I said, you can check out the reading assignment that I gave you, which is Getting Things Done by David Allen, if you want to. But that's entirely up to you. Any other questions? I'm going to wait for a couple more minutes, and if we don't have any questions, we'll close up. All right, everybody. Looks like we've kind of run out of questions. What I got to say is thank you. Not a lot of people have, not necessarily the willpower to sit through this entire thing.
I didn't sit through
Not a lot of people would like to just, get through it. Maybe some couldn't attend, but I'm sure it's difficult to spend the whole time listening to this stuff. I hope that all of you apply these things tomorrow. A lot of them can be even done right now, even the habits scorecard that I talked about earlier. And really, the important thing is starting small. And overall, that's kind of the too long didn't read of this workshop. Start small, emerge big, Kind of like Ant-Man, now that I think about it. Anyway, Ishan, come on. Thank you very much for attending. I hope you found this a very cool workshop. I will post the slides on the shared notes right now. There'll also be the recording for later. And, I'm glad you were around. This workshop was pretty rough for me at first. And I hope that perhaps you might want to see more of these kinds of topics in the future. Maybe you'd like to see me engage into getting things done or time tracking. Maybe you'd like to see me talk about other more complex aspects, such as context switching, which is a whole topic that I shouldn't talk about right now. Again, if you're interested, make sure to hit me up on Discord. I will definitely go back to Discord very soon now in the chat if you do have any informal questions you might want to ask. And I hope you enjoyed this workshop, and I will see you some other time. One last thing before I forget to log off. I would like you to fill the poll that I linked in the slides. If you want more of these workshops and you're interested, I linked the poll in the slides, which I've linked for before. Make sure to check them out. Maybe you're interested, and I might make more of these workshops in the future.